Hello, and welcome to the Beyond B2B Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Lee Odden, CEO of Top Rank Marketing. And today's guest is someone I've known since the early days of Marketo when he brought my team on to help with blog content and SEO. Jon Miller is one of the true pioneers of B2B marketing technology, co-founder and CMO of Marketo, which is acquired by Adobe, founder and CEO of Engagio, acquired by Demandbase, and now back in the lab building something new. Jon, I think everyone would agree, is literally helping shape the way modern B2B marketing is done. And I mean everything from demand gen to ABM to lifecycle marketing. And he continues to push the boundaries, things like AI, automation, and go-to-market strategy. It's going to be a delight for you to hear from Jon today. Jon, it's great to have you on the show.
It's really great to talk. I mean, we've worked together for so many years. We've done so many things, and every time we connect, the conversation is really engaging. So, looking forward to it.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, let's get to it. We go way back, right? We think we were talking about almost 18 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, and since that time, you've helped shape whole categories in B2B marketing, and now you're working on something new. When you look back over that journey, I'm wondering what's changed most when it comes to B2B content and how people are finding it.
Yeah. Well, when we were working together in the early days of Marketo, right? You were Top Rank was helping you with blog content, some influencer marketing outreach. I remember at the time, if we wanted to, and SEO, right? I remember at the time, if we wanted to rank for a keyword, all we really had to do was write a good blog post about that topic, and we'd show up. You could just like comment on somebody else's blog, and now all of a sudden, like, you're on their radar, right? And they like cross link back to you. You know, I at Marketo, I think I was an early innovator I wrote these things, the definitive guides, definitive guide to email marketing and lead nurturing and marketing automation. Some of them reached over 100 pages, and people loved them. I mean, I still have people who tell me today that like that's what taught them about, some topic. But a lot's changed since then. Like I wrote a version of a definitive guide at Demandbase. I personally think it was my best book yet. Like it's great content. And we really struggled to get people to download it. I think, the era of the big definitive guide is over. Buyers no longer binge on the big PDFs, right? They're grazing on micro content. They're stitching together their journeys from like a LinkedIn post, a video, a community thread, and search, has obviously changed, right? You can't show up on page one anymore, certainly just by having a blog post. It's not about having the links anymore, and then on top of that, right, it's not search engine optimization anymore. Now it's whether you call it search everywhere optimization or answer engine optimization. It's not about showing up on page one of Google. It's about getting, referenced inside of an AI answer, right? This is changing a lot of things, for CMOs, right? We'll talk more about brand, I'm sure today, but it completely even just, it's changing. How do you get your brand story out there,
Mhm.
right? If your whole message gets reduced into a reference on Wikipedia that an AI can pick up, do you really even have control over your brand? So yeah, content discovery has changed a lot, since then, since our early days. The playbooks that we used to do just don't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. This sort of micro content, micro interactions, micro conversions are sort of this building up and cumulative experience that you've got to create. The architecture of that is a little bit different than, like you say, the old days of publishing a blog post, getting some links, and then ranking. And we've actually, it's interesting. You mentioned, search everywhere optimization or whatever. We actually have an architecture called Best Answer Marketing that we've built out that gets into all this stuff. That it's really interesting in that the data sources you have to collect to inform a strategy to create those answer experiences are all available. And it's just that, folks aren't connecting the dots, and it's a bit of a chaotic time right now for a lot of different reasons, pressure to perform, fewer resources and such. But the good news, there is good news, and that there are tools and systems being developed now. There are some that exist, and there's people with experience that can help guide folks on that journey. Um, and speaking of journey, B2B marketing is on a journey, isn't it? I'm just kind of curious, with your depth of experience in the field and your success in the field, what's next? I mean, like, what are some of the major trends that you're seeing that are going to impact how brands are going to engage their customers over the next 6 months into 2026?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question because it sort of lies at the foundation of everything that we should be thinking about. I mean, I just said like the old playbook isn't working anymore, right? And it's more than just the old content playbook, right? I mean, at Marketo, I helped to promote this whole idea of the way you go to market, right? It was you use content and other things, and webinars to generate, you know, uh, leads that you would then nurture over time. And then we'd score them by tracking their digital behaviors and pass them to sales at the right time, who would qualify them and then pass them to an AE who would then close it, who'd pass it to customer success to then kind of, onboard them. And everything was like highly measurable. MQLs ruled the day. The CMOs talked about their funnels, ad nauseum, right? That was the playbook. And it worked for a while. And I think it did help marketing earn a seat at the revenue table and stop being perceived quite so much as the cost center that throws parties and makes color brochures, right? But then you fast forward to, I don't know, it's probably like 2021 as we're coming out of COVID and we're in that kind of we start to end that zero interest rate boom that we all saw. And every marketer I talked to started saying like, man, it feels hard out there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
like I'm struggling to make my numbers. I'm being asked to do more with less, right? Pipeline goals have gone up, budget's gone down. And worst of all that stuff I used to do isn't working anymore, right? Whether it's the definitive guide or the lead nurturing or the SDR outreach, it's just not working. And I think there's a lot of factors at play there, that behind kind of what's not working. If I really try to simplify it, I think there's really three key things, right? The first one is that the traditional model tried to treat marketing like a simple linear process, right? I can put my budget in, get MQLs out. I call, it was a gumball machine mentality. Put your quarter in and get the gumball out. But I think we're increasingly realizing that buying is complex. It's nonlinear. It's much more like the stock market or predicting the weather than tuning a simple linear machine. And so just any naive notion that we can kind of directly tie cause and effect, and this MQL or this campaign to this MQL to this deal, I think it's just frankly falling apart. Second, what I call tragedy of the commons. Marketers will hear about a technique that everybody's doing, and then everybody does it to the point that it stops working. And buyers get smart. They tune out all the noise. They know if they come to our website and download that definitive guide, they're going to start getting calls and emails that they don't want. And so basically, we've destroyed all the old tactics. But I think the worst problem with the old playbook is that it had a focus on short-term thinking. It was about MQLs this quarter. And it was about highly, being measurable. And that caused us to do things that were good for the quarter, but bad for the long-term customer experience, including things like gating content, right? Or sticking SDRs on everybody who downloaded an ebook, right? And so you put that all together, the old playbook just isn't working anymore. And increasingly, I think what we're realizing, whether it's Back to the Future or Return to the Old Days, what was happening is buyers are doing their research anonymously. They are only coming to our website and kind of raising their hand when, Sixth Sense research says that 81% of the time when they do that, they already have their preferred vendor in mind.
yep. Short list. Mhm.
Yeah. They've already even worked through their requirements. It's a validation process at that point. So This new playbook has to figure out how can we engage buyers before they want to raise their hand and connect with us, but in a world where they are actively trying to tune out and opt out of any unwanted marketing. Well, it turns out there is actually a way to do that. And marketers have been doing it for decades, which is building a brand, right? Because brands operate on emotions. Brands get out there in the marketplace. Brands are, how do people talk about you when you're not in the room, right? That's exactly what we need to be focusing on. I think what needs to change in B2B marketing is a recognition that brand is not soft and squishy and separate from revenue. That brand actually is revenue marketing because it means that you are the one people reach out to when they're ready. It means you win more deals, and it frankly makes all your demand gen work better, right? That's a big change. It requires different kind of leadership, different kinds of metrics, different perceptions of the role of marketing, in the company, and it also requires thinking about things beyond just how do I create this new pipeline, right? It gets into even things like NPS and customer success and advocacy and all these other things. So yeah, long answer, but I think we're
Great answer.
really changing what marketers need to be thinking about. Um, and I'm not saying it's brand or demand, it's both, but what clearly needs to happen is much more intentional focus on how are you creating the emotional connections that are out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. It's a full funnel experience. There's an expression. It's in B2B. It's not enough to inform B2B buyers anymore. You've got to make them feel something, and that lines up very well with this idea of brand. It's interesting, John, that you bring up something that really lines up with something that's coming out of some research that's coming out of the Marketing Innovation Group at LinkedIn. I think it's Mimi Turner and Jan Schwartz are talking about this very thing about the contribution brand has on the ability to drive revenue specifically. So yeah, I love to hear it. Be
Before we
honest,
move
it's
on, it's actually just I think there's a really interesting tie with brand and also answer engine optimization, right? The way you're gonna get cited by these, engines is if, not do you have like the page with the most links to it, right? It's are you out there people talking about you, right? And so again, these are all connected ideas.
absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned, best answer marketing framework. There's like these 6 pillars, but after data and strategy, it's about building trust, building signals of trust, and then also experiential content, multi-channel discovery. So it's like it all ties together, and it's about creating meaningful, not mechanical experiences, marketing experiences, right? And there's a lot of momentum, I think, from influential voices like yourself and like the folks at LinkedIn, as I mentioned, and others moving in this direction. I think it's a really net positive. It's not just good experience for the buyer, but to be honest, it's a hell of a lot more interesting as a marketer to execute on.
It's hard, but yeah, what I think CMOs need a lot of help to bring the rest of the C-suite along on this conversation. And especially, if you're private equity backed or something like that. I mean, I personally spent years telling investors the way you should measure marketing is MQLs, right? Now we need to change that because
Uh-oh.
that is exacerbating the problem.
You know, in a previous interview that we did with you, you talked about moving from a funnel concept to a bow tie.
Yep.
Growth after the sale. And that really stuck with me because of a lot of things that we do and that, this sort of full customer life cycle treatment versus just, awareness, consideration, purchase. So why do you think B2B companies, especially SaaS, don't expand their efforts this way? Why do they stop at conversion?
Yeah, it's almost like, you're training for the first mile of the marathon, but then walking the rest, Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think there's this glory of the deal, right? That I think comes mostly out of a sales culture, which is heavily influenced in kind of how SaaS companies, work. Like you ring the gong bell when you close the deal, right? Not when the customer goes live or when they renew or anything like that. And that ethos, I think, just ekes its way out into a bunch of places. You know, a lot of CMOs I speak to, right, get measured on marketing sourced new business pipeline. The whole idea of the MQL almost exclusively is a new business metric, right? Not an expansion metric. So, and even built into Marketo, like literally, there is a bias that we probably unconsciously built into Marketo to focus on the new business. Um, and then it gets even more subtle than that, right? These tools, they focus primarily on accounts and people, right? But the second somebody's a customer, the account gets marked customer, right? And that misses out on, well, there are 12 other buying groups in that account that could also buy this product, but no, it's a customer. We're going to just route all the inquiries over to the customer success person, right? So the point is that's a technical answer, but there are some very structural, deep reasons why SaaS has traditionally over rotated and biased into kind of the net new business. And that's got to change, right? I mean, um, you've probably heard me talk about the soccer team analogy, where rather than thinking about a relay race where it's marketing generates the MQL, which goes to the SDR, which goes to sales, which goes to the customer success. I think a soccer, American football, or sorry, soccer,
I gotcha.
uh, what they call football in Europe is a better analogy where you've got people who are playing different positions, sure, but they're constantly passing the ball back and forth, and everybody is involved when when a goal is scored.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. I love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's, it's another change in how marketing needs to be perceived and measured, right? It is not the group that creates just new pipeline. It's the group that drives adoption, renewals, expansion, advocacy, all that kind of stuff. And that requires different metrics and different investments and different ways of thinking about marketing.
Yeah, so it's business priority as well as a structural or system, change
Yeah.
probably that could be
Yeah.
made. Yep. Here's I think I like this idea, term you've used, marketing automation Stockholm syndrome. That first generation marketing automation platforms that are holding us back, while
Yeah.
the newer tools are long overdue. What would you describe as a reimagined automation platform? Like, what would that look like and feel like?
Yeah. First, just like, just addressing the kind of Stockholm syndrome point, right? I mean, Marketo is 19 and a half years old. HubSpot's 19 and a half years old. Eloqua's 25 years old, right? I mean, these are, uh, Eloqua inside of Oracle, not getting a lot of innovation. Marketo's inside of Adobe, not getting a lot of innovation. HubSpot's at least getting some innovation, although they're also focused on CRM and kind of a bunch of these other things. So these platforms aren't really keeping up. And, they missed out on the whole account-based marketing wave. I mean, the whole reason account-based marketing exists as a category is because these platforms couldn't get ahead of it. I mean, it really structurally shouldn't be its own category. And Forrester's even recognized that when they sort of have renamed everything revenue marketing platforms. They're at this point they're pretty burdened with technical debt. They're I talk to Marketo users and they just complain about these things called race conditions, which is this weird logic they have to build into Marketo because when a lead is created, all the campaigns start firing at the same time. And if you don't get thoughtful about adding appropriate weights in between some of those things, the process breaks down. And that's just the way Marketo works, you know? Um, and that's what I mean by Stockholm syndrome. Like people have spent so many years adapting to these systems and they're like weird little quirks and then buying additional products to sort of fill in the gaps around how those tools work. Things like lean data for matching and routing. Like, again, that exists only because the other platforms couldn't build that right properly. into the whole thing. So you have, we've just gotten like frogs being boiled in the water. We've gotten used to the weirdness of the way these applications work,
Yep.
to the point that we can't imagine the world a different way. And that's what I mean by Stockholm syndrome.
Right.
So, but there should be a better way, right? I mean, a system that's built in 2025 as opposed to 2006 will inherently scale better. um, but the most important, well, so it'll scale better. It can be built to understand accounts and buying groups natively, right? Not just as hacks. We were talking about the full funnel and the bow tie, right? These other platforms are slaves to the data in the CRM, which means that if you like if you want to do post-sale marketing, you really want to get stuff like support tickets and product usage into the map, marketing automation, so that you don't email a promotion to somebody who's got an active support ticket or has never logged into the product. But that's really hard to do with the legacy tools. But perhaps the biggest factor, right, it's almost amazing we've gotten this far into the podcast without talking about AI, really, is the
It's
rise of AI.
coming.
Right. You know, and if you put one ding onto the legacy maps, is that they are still today rules-based systems, right? They are if this, then that. Whether it's an Eloqua process chart or a Marketo flow, right? Marketers have gotten used to thinking about all the complexities of, well, okay, I emailed them last week, so I can't email them this, so I have to add this suppression filter, and I got to do this, and I have to add this rule, or things like data cleaning. If I want to standardize a state field, well, if the state contains this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this, and then you come up with this like, oh, well, I missed that one, so okay, I have to add it, right? That's just a crazy way to manage a system when AI should be able to do all that stuff better, right? AI should be able to say, I've got Lee, right? Like, I know what Lee likes, just like Instagram knows what Lee likes, right? And if I don't know what he likes, I can run some little micro tests. So I learn what he engages with, what he's interested in, what's most likely to help him and his buying group move forward. Let's do that. You know, I like to use Spotify almost as an analogy. Every single user in Spotify gets their own personalized playlist, right? Why shouldn't every person in your database get their own playlist of actions, that they're going to engage with and move forward? Legacy maps can't do that, but I think AI can. And as we do that, what's going to be amazing, I think, is we actually free up marketers from a lot of the complexity today, right? Like why do people say marketing automation is hard to use today? Why do they need marketing operations specialists to build campaigns? Right? It's because of all the complexity of the data and the rules around exclusions and who can I mail and who can I not mail. Um, AI can just handle all that for you, so that as a marketer, you can focus on the creative, right? You're the artist. Make an amazing campaign that will resonate with a human. Let the AI figure out who should get that and when. I just think that's a better framework that the legacy maps just won't be able to, it's too far from the way they're architected.
You're opening up another sort of interesting question about what those, like you talk about, what will humans focus on? What will that they do with that freed up time? And it is I think there's a lot of folks struggling with how they're going to use AI because there's obviously tools as easy to use as Google, right? Like GPT or Perplexity or Gemini or Claude or whatever. Um, there's something that I kind of came to the realization of that I'd love your feedback on. There's two things really. One is, crap in, crap out, right? So, so kind of like AI is like money. It makes you more of what you are. So if you're a broke ass, you get a lot of money, you get a rich one, right? And if you put in, if you have crap in your or status quo mediocrity thinking in your mind, and you put in that level of prompt, that guess what? That's what you're going to get out. I guess is what I'm trying to say. The other realization is that a tool is only as effective as the expertise of the people using it. So, you can invest in your capability, of crafting context and prompt, for example. And I feel like this applies to systems like the one you're probably building or a better map, um, in the future as well, right? That it's not just the capability of the tool that shows promise, it's the ability for humans to effectively use it and then allocate their time on the inspiration, innovation, the curiosity and innovation that's going to be the genesis for what these AI powered systems can output.
So I think, you mentioned ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity and Gemini. All the chatbots, right, are frankly just one application, you know, of the technology of the LLM foundation models. I think, maybe if you almost use like the internet as an analogy, right? There's this underlying technology of like IP networking, and things like that, right? And for a long time, like 1978 to like the 90s or something, right? Mostly the application of that technology was email and, message boards, over dial up, right? You know, um, it took a while for the underlying technology for people to imagine new applications that could exist from the underlying technology, right? So, and eventually we get Amazon and Uber and Airbnb and Facebook and all these other applications that use the underlying technology, but really aren't about the underlying technology, right? That I think is what needs to happen in AI, right? Right now, an AI application is an AI application, right? But just to go back to marketing automation, what happens when we have an marketing automation application that just happens to be built from the ground up, assuming AI exists, right? How would you build the application differently knowing that's there? What other applications can we imagine and build, right? That exists that you can build because this technology exists that maybe you could not have built before. That's what we need to move to. And as we move to that, it's not going to become about how good of a prompter are you, right? Or even necessarily, how good the RAG data you put into the thing is. It becomes about what is the quality of that application. Um, that won't happen overnight, right? The internet took a long time, right, to make that happen. It happened faster with mobile phones. It'll probably happen even faster with AI, right? But we're not there yet, right? There are relatively few applications out there that are just using AI natively to just do the application better.
Right. It's the point isn't that the application is using AI. The point is the application achieves an objective and happens to be using AI to help you do it.
Yeah. I'll give you my favorite super duper simplistic example.
Okay.
Okay. My kids go to summer camp, or at least used to go to summer camp. And then the summer camp would load photos of the kids at camp, right? And every day when you get the email notification that we've loaded new photos, you then spend 45 minutes playing Where's Waldo, right? Looking through each photo to like try to find, oh, is there a picture of my kid? Is there a picture of my kid? And then what happened is they added AI. You load a photo of your kid, and now they say, here are the photos of your kid, right? Magical, seamless, right? That's not an AI application, but it just suddenly made it 10 times better because AI is there.
Right.
Maybe that's a simplistic, dumb example, but I think it sort of makes the point.
No, it's a good no, you're right, right. So the limitations are removed. A lot of them, many of or most of them are removed, because of the user, because the application is so good at being able to take whatever human input there may be and creating the output that's desired.
Yeah, let's apply that to back to marketing automation for a second, right? Today, because the tools are so complicated, what happens is the marketers create a brief. They say, I want a webinar about XYZ. Here's the audience I want to go after. Here's some sample copy you might use, or maybe here's the actual email copy I want. And then they send that over to a marketing operations specialist to go log into Marketo or Eloqua and build the damn thing. And then there's a back and forth because, oh, I didn't quite get the audience right, and the email needs to look slightly different. And the whole thing has like a 2-week SLA or whatnot, just because that's the way it works once you have these handoffs and, and things like that. Right. Wouldn't it make more sense to the marketer to just describe what they want to the AI and then have the campaign get built for them magically? Like that's just a better approach.
Yeah,
Right.
I
That's what
agree.
we that's the kind of world that we need to move to.
So the world we're in is, at least when it comes to Martech, is a bit messy. And as you can imagine, a lot of marketing leaders are inheriting um, the sort of the Scott Brinker super graphic, right? Wow. Anyway, so there's tools that people aren't using. They overlap. There's fragmented data and that sort of thing. I'm just curious, if you're in that situation, you come into an environment where this is occurring. I'm just wondering where you'd start to clean that up. What's your approach?
Well, let's first start with the fact that it's messy, it's expensive, right? And these CMOs are under pressure to do more with less, right? And I think, you know, everybody is like, man, I really should be able to consolidate my stack, right? And I really should be able to do less. So 2 points I want to make. First is, yeah, there's a tendency to want to start with the tools. Well, do I need this one? Do I need this one? It's pretty generic advice, but of course, the smarter move is start with strategy, right? Like, what outcomes do you want? What are you trying to achieve? What do you wish you could do that you can't do? And then kind of go from there. I think we on the subject of AI though, there's risk that we are going to exacerbate the problem, right? Because what's happened is lots of little AI tools have spun up, right? Write your copy better, or do this better, or I mean, God forbid, automate your outbound SDR. Um, and I think that in the near term is going to exacerbate this problem of Martech sprawl. When I talk to folks, you know, I'm encouraging them to think about, rather than adding a bunch of AI onto your legacy stacks, right? Think about, where is there an opportunity to reimagine your stack around AI? And, could this gets to everything we talked about and is admittedly slightly self-serving, but could a modern AI native core platform, you know, bring the things that you need, bring the AI that your CEO wants you to be investing in, right? But in a way that consolidates your stack rather than adds more sprawl, you know? Um, so yeah, I think, it will be better to make your foundational technologies AI native rather than try to sprinkle AI candy all over the legacy stuff.
Right, right. Because then you're just creating more messiness and expense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's switch up a little bit away from the tech of marketing, and talk a little more on a bit on the brand side. As a person who's functioned and generously given all kinds of useful information in the marketplace, you're a very respected voice in the industry, and you've also obviously, as we mentioned, helped build some really influential and respected brands. And I'm wondering, for about advice from you about for marketers that are trying to build, credibility and trust and visibility for their own brands. What advice do you have for building, that thought leadership and influence in 2025 and into the next year?
To answer that, I've been thinking a lot about just like, what kind of marketing is going to work in an age where AI can generate infinite amounts of content, and where AI will also increasingly, I think, stand between the marketers and the customers. Zero click search is just a simple example of that, right? Where they're not going to your website. We're going to start seeing that, I think, in our email inboxes, right? We're already seeing it a little bit with, just priority inbox from Gmail, right? Where they're sort of saying this email pays more attention. But once we have an agent in our inbox, filtering our messages, auto responding to some messages, like that's coming, right? And just like we saw traffic go down from zero click search, we're going to see open rates and clicks go down on our emails because of AI in the inbox. So if you just assume both of these things are happening, infinite amounts of content, but also disintermediation, I think there are three things that really stand out uh, in the age of AI. I think the first one is human experiences. Like whether it's a dinner or taking, your best customers off to an event in one country, or a virtual activity, but where humans can actually engage and interact with other humans, that's going to have an impact, right? Um, Chris Penn has a great line, that an AI summary of an experience is like a photograph of your trip to Hawaii as opposed to the feeling of your toes in the sand, right? Like you cannot summarize an experience, properly. And so that will continue to stand out. I think second is relationships. And that's a broad category, but obviously human relationships will stand out, will matter in the age of AI. As a subcategory of relationships, when there's infinite content, I think what will matter more than the content is the source of the content, right? If you can be the trusted source that people say, oh, I know when Jon Miller is talking about B2B marketing, that's worth paying attention to, right? That will matter, right? This is already happening with the news where people pay attention to some news sources, not the others. Increasingly, we'll pay more attention to some sources of information, over others. Um, the third category is what I call craftsmanship, which is as humans, we can tell when something took human effort, right? You can tell that LinkedIn post was written by AI and that one was really put together with care and effort by somebody. And that can apply across not just writing, but a whole bunch of other, marketing tactics. So experiences, relationships, and craftsmanship. I think for individual marketers, we're seeing that really play out, especially with the idea of founder-led growth, where where the content isn't coming from faceless brands. It's coming from a company and its leaders, even if it's not directly the founder. And it's done with consistency and authenticity, and that builds trust, and it builds relationships, and it can be done with craftsmanship. A quick, I don't know, a quick sidebar. So personally, right, I've been working, publishing content on LinkedIn, and stuff like that. One of the things that I started doing, late last year is combining two of my passions, one cocktails and two B2B marketing. So I published on LinkedIn a series of videos in which I talk about B2B marketing while making a cocktail, which might be the world's most narrow niche ever. Um, According to LinkedIn algorithm, these videos don't get great impressions. Like they are, if I'm just trying to maximize the algorithm to just get views, the videos are not worth it.
Yeah, but the
But
quality.
in terms of impact on the marketplace, people talk to me about these videos. They come to me. They say they've engaged with it, and I think what they can see is the craftsmanship. Right? I work hard on the videos to make them pretty good.
Yeah.
And that stands out, and I think that helps to build that thought leadership and that influence.
What's the name you give that series?
Oh, I don't have a name for it.
I thought you had a name for it.
No, I probably should. B2B
Okay,
marketing
well,
and cocktails is probably not the best name. I'll have to think about that one.
well, I don't know, b2bmarketingcocktail.com. I can feel it. I can see a channel. All right. Well, awesome. Well, I've got one more question for you, and there's a prediction that you have made a couple of times, and Marketing Profs is where I found it, about B2B marketing and brands and the need for brands to invest in original research. And I'm just wondering, so you've given that advice before. Would you give that? Would you consider that still to be good advice in 2026 as well?
Yeah, more than ever, right? And it goes exactly to that idea I was just talking about craftsmanship, right? Because uh, original research is something that clearly takes time and effort for a company to produce. And as a result, I think it stands out. It also has a nice flywheel effect, right? Like it's content, but it also gets media coverage, right? It can fuel your social calendar. It can give your sales team insights on to kind of open doors. And it gives like content that answer engines actually really kind of like to reference. Um, so, I think obviously research is usually quantitative, right? That can be done through surveys and things like or benchmarks. My favorite examples are when a company uh, uses their own proprietary data to produce insights that are valuable to the marketplace. Gong Labs does this really well. Carta with Peter Walker does that really, really well. I think, in a world where, AI can generate infinite content, it cannot generate truly original research, right? And so it turns all that noise into meaning. And as a result, it gets cited, it gets shared, it gets remembered.
Well, I'm very happy that you said that. That prediction is so good. We just completed fielding uh, surveys responses from a new research um, project that is ironically advocating for the value of original research. So
It's
yeah,
very meta.
very meta. Yeah, we're doing that. We're partnering with a company called Ascend too,
Yeah, sure.
and they do a lot of work in the marketing tech space. And so we're partnering and putting something together. We're going to be launching it here in another month or so. So it'll be about full funnel thought leadership, basically, and should be interesting stuff. So I really appreciate you taking the time. It is absolutely a pleasure every time I get an opportunity to speak with you, John. And thank you for being so generous with your knowledge and your insights. Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
As I said, I invest a lot on LinkedIn. So follow me on LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn. Um, is definitely, I think, the best way to kind of keep up to what I'm up to and continue to get clues about what I'm building.
Great. So I see you're speaking at Marketing Profs B2B Forum. Is that still correct?
Oh yeah,
Great.
we'll have
I
to
will
hang
see
out.
you. I will see you in Boston then.
That's awesome.
Um, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Beyond B2B Marketing podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you can stay tuned for our next interesting guest. And remember, there's no better time to break free of boring B2B.